Fake it till you make it is bad advice. Let me show you why.
So this is kind of the psyche in like the Jungian sense. Okay, so you have. I'm simplifying it obviously, but this is just to explain why this advice is bad. So you got three parts. You have the ego, persona, and the shadow. So the ego is kind of just generally this is what people think they are, and it's kind of the guy that's kind of in control, kind of running things. It's who you hear when you're thinking pretty much. And then you have the persona. The persona is pretty much who you are to other people, who you think you are to other people, how other people interpret you. So I don't know. This might just be me, but like, if you have like different friend groups, you kind of act different towards each of them. So that's what the persona is. You act kind of like according to your friend group. And then you have the shadow, which is pretty much anything you repress. So let's say you're a very clean person. So you would repress, being messy and messiness. In the shadow, it gets confused a lot because you think, oh, shadow, it's evil, blah, blah, blah. But really, it's just the opposite of whatever you are, essentially. So yeah, again, another example, if you if you're a hard worker, then what you repress is that you are lazy or something, some attribute like that, something like that. And so what happens pretty much when you fake it is you're giving your energy to this persona, and fundamentally what faking it till you make it means is, you're doing something that is maybe you don't want to do, or like it's a lot of work or whatever. So, but you're pushing past that pain essentially, and you're pretending, and you're trying to almost trick yourself into thinking like, oh, this is all worth it. This is all worth it. And we don't know if it's gonna be worth it or not. That's the whole thing. But basically, what you're doing is just giving your energy to your persona and how people are gonna perceive you while you're going along this thing you don't really want to do, and that ends up bringing a lot of like negative energy to the shadow. And basically, because you're not expressing how you really feel, is the entire like underlying message in that advice, is just don't feel what naturally comes to you. And so that is obviously, it's going to build your shadow up. And why is this bad? Why is it bad to build your shadow up? Okay, well, pretty much what a lot of Jung's kind of message with the shadow is, you need to integrate this into your normal being, and you can't deny it, essentially. Because what happens is pretty much what happens in something like Breaking Bad, or like what's that one book called? Is it Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde? I might be switching the last names up, but whatever. Pretty much it's that kind of idea where whatever you repress, it will slowly start to like take over and negatively affect. It doesn't matter what kind of like shadow you have. It's just gonna negatively affect your livelihood. So let me expand more on that idea. So in Breaking Bad, pretty much what happens is, well, you've seen the show, but if you haven't, you really should go watch it. But anyway, what happens is, Walter White, he's this teacher, and he's probably a genius. He's probably like because for one, he has a Nobel Peace Prize, well, maybe not a Nobel Peace Prize, but it's like an award or something for crystallography, and that is very impressive. Crystallography is a very is a really just tough what's it called, like science, because it's about the molecular structure of like cells and or not cells, but molecules, whatever. It's super, super tough. So, but he's pretty much he's working like two dead-end jobs, essentially. He's a teacher, which teachers don't get paid much. And then he also has a second job on top of that, working at this, what's it called? Why am I forgetting words right now? This car wash, Jesus Christ. But anyway, so yeah, he works as a teacher and then at the car wash, and and pretty much at that point he is faking it right there because he does not want to do. Well, maybe he does want to. I don't think he wants to teach that bad, but that's just where he is right now, for other reasons, but it's not important. And then he's also working on a car wash, which, I mean, the car wash can only be so fun, right? So pretty much what he's doing is faking it. And to expand on the persona a little bit, for the record, because I kind of glossed over it, the persona is kind of weird because without other people, the persona would essentially not even exist. Because this is like the mask you put on when you go out in public, like if you were the only person on earth, then the persona would essentially not exist. Like it would not even really be a thing. But anyway, so basically Walt is like giving a lot of energy to this persona of like being this chemistry teacher that he doesn't really want to be a teacher. He definitely doesn't want to work at the car wash for sure. And he's pretty much punching under his weight right now because his life is so mundane and not, challenging at all. So yeah, it's relatable, but it's also like he's faking it, but he's not gonna make it anywhere, like where is he gonna go after he's done teaching or like working at the car wash? Like you can't really go up from a position like that. So what's happening is all this energy, for every action there is an opposite and equal reaction. So that's basically kind of the ethos, is you're giving your energy to persona. Meanwhile, this is not emotionally where you want to be. So you're also building up your shadow even more. And what happens when you build up your shadow is your shadow can sometimes take over, or I don't know why I'm trying to rephrase that. Yeah, so basically your shadow kind of can take over and almost change who you are, which, yeah, that's what it does. So throughout the show, Walt becomes a drug dealer because he gets diagnosed with cancer and he doesn't have a long time to live, and okay, we know what he actually wants, and he actually just wants to, be somebody and have this empire. But the excuse he gives to himself to kind of trick himself is that he wants to take care of his family, which he does want to take care of his family. Like, let's not get that twisted. But eventually at the end of the show, he admits he did it for himself. He didn't do it for his family. He is giving the money to his family and whatever, but he just did it for himself, which that's at the end of the show. That's kind of when he becomes self-actualized, but that's a whole different video to talk about. But basically, as the show progresses, his shadow, his dark side, his pride essentially over his meth work and chemistry, it starts to take over him and starts to negatively affect him, because he doesn't really understand what he's doing. Like when he like manipulates Jesse, like he genuinely believes like whatever Walt needs is what Jesse will be good for Jesse, even though that's not necessarily true. I mean, he does realize this at certain point near the end of like the 6th season. He kind of does realize like, okay, I'm kind of manipulating him. Like he admits he doesn't admit it, but he I don't even know. Like he kind of apologizes. He doesn't verbally say I'm sorry, but he kind of apologizes. But anyway, basically his shadow takes over, his pride takes over, and he becomes this kind of unrecognizable monster. And everybody who has watched the show will agree at some point, Walter will stop. You will stop kind of sympathizing and sympathizing with him. There'll be a point in the show where you're like, okay, this is no longer the same guy. This is that Heisenberg. This is that meth lord kind of character that he's crafted himself into, you know. And so with faking it to make it, I totally got sidetracked. Faking it till you make it is you're giving your energy to appear as a certain thing, but you slowly are going to build up your shadow. And over time, eventually the shadow, whatever you oppress is going to be what is like the main kind of theme in your life. You know, so let me give another example. So let's say, okay, this is probably gonna be the one that I can kind of cut on the most, just because it's kind of where I'm at. But basically, let's say, well, okay, hold on. No, this is not really where I'm at. It's somewhat where I'm at. But let's say, you know, you're trying to, you know, get a girlfriend, right? And you try and you go on all these dates. You go out, and more times you do it, you realize this might not even be possible, you know, and you don't know why. And some people, instead of interpreting that as, okay, I haven't found the right one, I haven't, you know, maybe I need to better myself, or something like that, you can also turn this into a negative, well, not even a negative, but just kind of the opposite thing, whereas it's not my own fault, it's women's fault. And you see all these like these MGTOW people, or like these like total like kind of right wing not even anti-feminist, but just like not for women kind of people who just they hate women. And you know, and it's pretty clear that they're unreasonable, and they're not being logical. Like if you like look at videos of these people where they're just totally dissing women, like, oh, women are stupid, all women are bad, you know. It's like the same thing with women when they say all men are trash, you know. It's like, it's obviously not a logical thing, but of course that perspective doesn't come from nowhere. They had some like trauma or some history where they just didn't have any luck with them romantically or anything. So what happens is that'll build up the shadow, and eventually, again, when you don't acknowledge the shadow at all, and you don't you don't try to integrate it into yourself, eventually it'll start to take over. And that's what happens with these guys. I say, oh, all women are trash and they're whores and all that stuff, because that's obviously not true. Fundamentally, that's obviously not true. But because they have had such bad luck in their own lives, they just can't seem to figure it out, and they can't admit it to themselves that maybe it was also their own fault to some extent, because it is to some extent. But they give this pretty much excuse as to why they can't get women, is it because they're whores and they're stupid, and they betray you, and you know, all these reasons, again, that are, you know, obviously at first glance it's like, okay, that's total bullshit, you know. So that's what's kind of happening with the shadow, is if you don't acknowledge it, if you don't acknowledge your quote unquote dark side, then it'll build up, and it'll be explosive when it finally pushes through, because this is a real thing. This is a real thing that can genuinely like take over you, you know. Like, this is not like some woo woo like mystical fucking like, I don't know. It's not. It's a real thing. It's a real thing. It's psychology, you know. And of course, psychology is a relatively new field of science. And even if we go and look at, you know, the Freudian psyche, it's kind of the same thing, because you'll have what is the ego, the super ego, and then the id, and it's kind of the same thing, where the id is kind of your primal desires. So if you start repressing, you know, your desires like that, it'll try to push through even more with even more force, and then you'll have to acknowledge it. So this is not like some woo-woo bullshit where it's just like magic or whatever. Like, oh, if you do this, so, like whatever. So that's why I don't think fake it till you make it is good advice. It's just kind of, I don't even know who really coined that term or anything, but I don't know. I don't think it's good advice. So do what you will, So